All right. So now that we have a good understanding of what the relationships are with an Airtable and kind of what Airtable is for and how it's different from spreadsheets, um, I started a new example with a similar structure, but I added another table called invoices. And I'm going to use this example to sort of start building an Airtable database so you can see sort of how it could work and some automations that you could put in, different extensions and things like that that you could potentially build. But in this particular video, I just want to walk through all of the field types. I think it's really important to know what you can do and what you can't do. And then later on, I'll talk a little bit about how that's different from Notion, because I think that the way that Notion deals with field types sometimes is a little different, especially when you get into formulas and how that nomenclature works and the syntax and everything. So the first thing for customers, I'm going to start building out this table a little bit more, and you're going to come along with me. So feel free to build this along with me. So for the first thing, this is called the primary field, and it's always defaulted to name, the name of the column, the main primary field, and it's what they call a short or single line text, which is just a single line. You can't put multiple lines on it. It's pretty self-explanatory. But you can also change the primary field to any of these field types, which is really cool. You can use a date. You can actually use a formula, which is what I'm going to use. You can use any of these fields to populate the data. And essentially why this is important is because whenever you are linking a table, for example, services, and I've already linked this. So services and invoices, I don't have an invoice created, but whenever you pull up an invoice, what's going to come up is this primary field right here. And so that's important to know, because if it's just a date, for example, it's going to be hard to know exactly what that data is referencing. So it's just important as you're building your database to think about that, because whenever you're linking stuff and if you have to reference things, or if you have to change things, or if you're going back to double check, maybe something got added accidentally, or anything like that, you want to be able to. I mean, you can always click on the record and it'll take you into it, but to save yourself some time, it's always important, I think, to think about that ahead of time before you get too far ahead, and then you have to go back and change a bunch of stuff. So something to consider. So I'm going to make this a formula, but not right now. Actually, I can do it right now. So I've already created a first and last name. What I want to do is I want to concatenate, which is an Excel term, but I essentially want to, I want to join those two things together to make a full name. So I'm going to rename this. Actually, I'm going to name this full name, and this is going to be a formula. So if you click on it, it sort of tells you how you can use the formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use first name, and if you just type it, it will bring up the field for you. In order to join things, you have to use this ampersand, and then to put a space, you hit the quotes. It always puts a two quote on either side of the cursor, which is really nice, I think. Add a space, and then you have to add another ampersand. You don't have to add all these spaces. I just do it because it looks a little neater. Last name. So if you do that, then right now it's blank because there's nothing there. But if we put in Bob Smart, then it will join those two together. Let's say John Doe. So I just want to put something in here too. So if you do put a space like Jane, it will actually remove that space for you, because it will see it as, it'll just bring it back to the main thing. So in here it shows there's a space, but it'll actually just remove that completely, because it will just cut it at the last thing. So that's how you can use a formula. That's just a very simple formula. I'll go more into formulas as we get into this process more and more. But the next thing I want to do is I want to add an email because I'm going to want to have contact information. And as you see, you know, when I added field, I'm going to do it again just so you can see it again because I know I'm going to add a phone number too. If you add a phone number, you can actually name this whatever you want. But if you don't name it, it's going to just use the default of whatever's built in the system. So in order to reorder these, you can just drag and drop them. They're pretty simple. You know, you can put them in any order. You can actually even hide them. You can delete them. You can, if you hide that, then it'll still be in the database and it's still a field that you can populate. But it's going to be hidden. If you want to unhide it, you just come over here and you hide it, and it'll put it in whichever order. You can also reorder them this way and put them in any sort of order. Something I'm just thinking about as I'm talking is that each one of these columns is called a field. And that's the term that we use in databases. It's a field that input goes into a container, essentially, of something that it's holding. And each of these can be formatted in a specific kind of way. So phone number is a specific kind of field. Email is another kind of field. Notes is what's called a long text. You can use rich formatting like bolding and italics and bullets and numbers and stuff like that. So let's get back to the email real quick and let's get through this and then I can move on. So Bob Smart at, I'm just going to use domain.com. That's Jane Doe or John Doe, excuse me, at domain.com, and then Jane Doe at domain. I guess we could do Gmail, but for this example, I'm using this phone number 555-555-5555. So again, you see this gets formatted a specific way, which is really nice because then you don't have to really think about the numbers, you know? It's super nice and it makes it a lot easier. So yeah, this is really a really nifty thing. So moving on to let's look at the other type. So this is a status. The title of it's status, and it's called a single select. And this is where you can use different options, sort of like a data validation that you can select only one option at a time. You can color code these, or you can choose to not color code them, and the text will just show up. If you want to change the color code, you click on that. If you have a premium account, then, or a pro account is what I think they call it, then you have more color selection options. You can have different, like a bigger range of colors essentially. But if you don't, then this is all you have. And this is, I think, plenty. You can also alphabetize them. The way that they are listed in this field is the order that they're going to be listed in. So I listed them in a specific way, or this is a default actually, but I did create invoices. I created a status here that was for work completed, sent, and paid. And I put that in a specific order, and you can color them in a specific way, and you can have them ordered in any kind of way that you want. So I don't really need well, I guess maybe a status could be inactive and then active. That seems like good. Green seems like a good one for that. And I will leave that for inactive. Status, we'll leave that there. I'll make them all active. Something you can do if you need to create all of them in one, you can do this just like in Excel, and you can drag it down and it will copy it. Another way that you can do that is you can actually just Command C or Control C on a PC, and then you can select these, and then you can Control V or Command V, and then it'll copy those across a bunch of different records. So we talked about how these are fields, all the columns. All of the horizontal rows are called records. And these are all of these fields are related to one single record, right? So this, if I open this, if I expand this record, then you'll see all of the fields that were these columns populated in this single record. So this column, or this row here, in database terms, we call it a record, and all of these columns here in database terms we consider fields. And this is just the grid view that you can use, which is very similar to Excel. It's probably the most familiar to anyone who uses Excel. That's what this is called. So the next thing, so an assignee is essentially just the user who is like if you have a team, if you invite people, this is really the most useful whenever you're using Airtable in a team, which I think is one of the powerful parts of using Airtable is having people that you're collaborating with. It's great as an individual, and I think it's great to stay organized or to use it for your business, to generate invoices, to create some sort of automation in the workflow that you have. I think that's super great, but it's really powerful when you're working with a team because it keeps things together. It cuts down on emails. It cuts down on repetitive tasks, data entry, things like that, especially when you're working with teams from multiple departments and you're using the same data. Instead of having to re-enter that multiple times over and over and over again, you can have the department where it originates that can then be shared with all the other departments. So for example, let's say you have a client and they're in a, you're tracking them through a particular process. Say they start with contracting, and then they go into another department, and let's say marketing, and then that goes into another department, and then that goes into another department, and so on and so forth. And you want that data to get tracked through potentially multiple tables, multiple databases even, instead of having to re-enter that data every single time in all of those different departments, tables or databases. You can use that data that originates with the first department that actually inputs it the first time, and then it can get tracked along all the way to the end and even through the life of the client, and it can get used over and over and over again. That makes things a lot easier. So that's what the assignee role I think is used for, in my opinion, is that whenever you are assigning a task or someone takes ownership of something that they're working on, everyone can know what they're working on. And then you can also filter by this. So, like if you only want to look at your assigned tasks, then you can filter by your name. And I'll just show you what it looks like. So right now this is the name that I came up with for my account. So yeah, you can just assign this to your account if you want, but it's not going to really do anything if you're working by yourself. So I'm actually going to delete this because I don't really need it. For this notes thing, you can use this to create a note about Bob, about John, about Jane, all your customers. You say Bob is great and is always on time with his payments. That's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be anything, but I think it's great maybe to have some notes. See, Jane runs her own business and uses a lot of write-offs. Just like it can be anything that's helpful for you and how to run your business, or to work on your project or whatever that is. The next thing, multi-select. This is similar to single select, but it's you can select more than one. So let's say business owner. Let's say I don't know. I'm just making shit up right now. Married. Let's say has kids, and let's say has property. I'm thinking in terms of taxes because I'm just now going through my taxes. So let's say Bob, he's a business owner. Let's say he's single, and let's say he has property. All right, so you can do this. Let's say John is married and has kids. Let's say Jane is a business owner. So you could use this. And one thing that's really powerful is that you can filter by this. So let's say you only want to see people who are business owners. Let's say you're working on that. So you can say, by the way, this field, they use it, they call it tags by default, but it's really a multi-select. And like I said before, you can name it whatever is useful for you to identify that whenever you're working through stuff. So tags, let's say it's exactly business owner. So now all you're going to see are people who are business owners. And then and you can have multiple different views that you can work. You can also do this manually, but you can create views. Here you can rename this. Let's say business owners. So now anytime you click on that, it's just going to filter business owners. And if I start a new grid, let's just say all customers, that's going to just by default, everything's going to be there. So that's why I named it all customers. You can name this business owners. Let's create another one. Let's say has property. Let's create this. And let's filter by the tags. And let's say is exactly has property. So let's say you want to see somebody that has exactly business owner. Let me refresh this page. Sorry, having a little technical difficulties over here. Has property. That's why. So I put is exactly. So it's only going to find records that has exactly just that. If you want to see things that have, they could have property, they could have kids, they could be married, they could have a business, they could have all these tags. If you want to see someone who has any of them, then you want to say has any of property. So that's why it wasn't showing up before. Is so we know that Bob has property, but he's also single and he's also a business owner. So he's a business owner. Excuse me. That's why he's not here. Is because in this he has multiple, and Jane business owner is the only thing. So if you want to see everybody who's a business owner and not only a business owner, then you want to filter this by has any of. So then Bob will show up here and you'll be able to see that. So the way you filter is really important. And it's a very logical kind of thing. You have to think through like the logic of it. I think when I first started with databases, it wasn't hard, but it was just sort of like, oh, yeah, the way that I'm using this phrase, I have to really think about like how I want the data to show up. Because if it's exactly, then it's only going to be one sort of situation. But if you say has any of, then it's a totally different set of results. Same thing as has all of. If I want to see has all of business owner, has property, and is married, I could create a filter that has all of those. If they don't have all of them, they're not going to show up. Same thing, has none of, is empty, or is not empty. So if you want to see potentially the customers that you haven't tagged and you haven't identified as one of these categories, then you can say is empty, and then you'll know, okay, these are the ones I need to focus on. I need to categorize these depending on whatever your workflow is. So the next thing, I'm going to go back to all customers so I can see all the data. I don't need this extra row. The next thing is date. Pretty self-explanatory. By default, it doesn't include the time. It is just a normal. You can change your formatting here. You can actually change your formatting through a formula as well. I can show that later on when I get more into formulas, because there's a lot more I want to dig into than just dates. For now, I'm just going to keep the normal local. You can create a time zone. You can have it default to the current date. So like whenever a record's added, you could just have it default to that if that's what you want. So I'm going to create that. You could call this date added. You can call it whatever you want. I've already got phone number and email. URL, if they have a website, you could use this as a website. So here I'm actually going to customize this. And so you could put in their website, bobsmart.com, johndoe.com. Let's just do google.com just so you can see that. So when you click on this, it's actually going to open up the URL. And that's the same for all of these URLs. So the next thing is going to be a number. A number is purely numbered. You cannot put what's called a string or a text, and like anything alphabetical, it's only numbers. You can have different presets here, which I don't really I don't mess with those too much. Decimals, I usually, depending on what it is, I usually do use 0 because I want a whole number and I don't want decimals to it necessarily. It's going to default to this automatically, so you have to change that. You can decide whether or not you want to show 1,000 separator or not, depending on the type of number, and then what abbreviation you want to use for these operators. So I'm just going to create that. I'm not going to show you anything too specific with that. Currency, self-explanatory. You can make it whatever you want. You can type in a currency, whatever currency you're working in. If you're working in multiple, then you'll probably have to create multiple currencies, and then you'll have to make a formula to show whichever one is filled, depending on what you want. If you have a question about that, leave a question in the comment. Happy to discuss that if you are talking about if you want to have a conversation about currencies and formulas and how those two things correlate, happy to chat more about that. Same thing about the operator here. You can either allow negative numbers or not allow negative numbers. So if you're doing any sort of budgeting or you're using things like discounts or whatever, allowing negative numbers could be useful here. So thinking about that is good. You can always come back and change this. Once you hit create field, you can go back. So if you do decide that you want to change that, just go to edit field and it brings all the options back up again. Again, this is the default name value. So if you want to change that, please do that. You can always go back by clicking edit and then it will do that. Percentage is this pretty much the same thing as a number field. You can only use it with numbers, but you can create a percentage. Here again, you can create how many decimal spaces you want to allow, or if you just want it to be whole. You can also, with this percentage, you can actually display a progress bar. I'm not going to go into that now, but you can instead of showing like a percentage of how many tasks have been done or completed, or how much of something percentage-wise, you can have it show a progress bar, which I think is really cool. It's just more visual. The next thing is duration. So this is, again, a similar thing to a number. And then you can have this. This is really good when you're calculating time, because then you can use this as a duration to see what the duration of something is in minutes or seconds or hours or whatever. Days. You can also use formulas for this. Again, I'm going to go into formulas more in a different video, but this is all the options that you can choose in the duration field here, which it's pretty cool that they have specific fields for all these things. You can choose a rating, maximum number. Then you can, what the style is. I think this is really great for customers actually, because let's say you want to rate the customer. You can say this customer is a 5-star customer. This one's a 4. Maybe this one's a 3. And I think that having that, potentially like here, and seeing that rating and being able to, I mean, not that it necessarily matters, but just when you're going to interact with them, or if you're working with a team, having that visual of like, oh, like this might be a difficult customer, or this one's a great customer, or that might be helpful. So let's see. I'm not going to do formulas. I'm not going to do rollups yet. Counting. See, I don't use this one very much actually. Lookup. So a lookup field is based on the relationships that you have. So here I don't have any relationships. Let me make one. So let's link. So we're going to link customers to invoices, right? So a customer, they potentially could have multiple invoices. So I'm going to say yes. So invoices. So these are lookup fields. So let's say I want to see the services that they have, that they've purchased or whatever. So I'm going to add one, and it's going to add that additional lookup field to this table as well. So if I add, I don't think I have an invoice. Let me just make a example invoice just for now. So, and I'm going to have to add some services. So I'll do consulting. So let me go back. So if Bob Smart, this is his invoice, it's automatically going to populate the services that are on that invoice, which I think is handy, because you don't have to necessarily click into this invoice to see what the services are. They're populated right there for you. And as you get into more advanced things with extensions and generating certain things, that might be helpful depending on what you're going after. If you do need to add a lookup later on, though, you can add a lookup here. You can select a table. It doesn't have to be, it could be one that's not necessarily linked right now. And then you want to choose a field and all these different things that you want. You can sort the records inside of that field to be sorted by a specific, whatever's in that table specifically, how you want that to be done. I'm not going to create that because I've already got to look up. This is a lookup field technically. So these are really, I think, really useful, super important. I think more important than a lot of people give them credit. And I think I should honestly think they should be defaulted, but they're not. But in every single table that I create, I add these, especially when you're working with a team, because it's always really good to know when things are created, when they're modified, who created them, and who modifies them. So you can just create these. Again, you can do this. You can include the time if you care about the time. If you don't, if you just want the date, you can. I leave the time just because. And you can do 12-hour or 24-hour. I always select 24. You can use the same time zone for all your collaborators. You can display the time zone. I don't use that very much because pretty much everyone I work with is in the same time zone, and it doesn't really affect my work. So let's do created. I'm just going to create these created by, last modified. I should have showed you this. So you can have this update when any field is updated, or you can actually select. If you only want to see, let's say when the status is updated, you can have this only update the date and time whenever the status is updated, and you can change anything else. You can change their name, their tag, their notes, phone number, email, anything else, and it won't update unless the status is updated. I like to just keep all the fields just so I know this record was last updated at this time. You can also add multiple updated times for specific fields, and you could say status updated, email updated. You can have all those separated if you wanted to do that, or if that's something that's really important to the work you're doing. For me, the whole record is fine. The last thing is, or the last two I'm going to go over auto number and button. I don't use barcode very much. Actually, I think I've tried to, but I don't really use it in the work that I do, so it's not super important. Auto number is exactly what it says. It's going to automatically generate unique incremental numbers for each record. So you're going to create this, and then every single record is going to get a unique ID. And Airtable already creates a unique idea, so it doesn't really. I don't know how important this is, really. I don't know. If there's a specific case that you see it useful for, please let me know. From what I do and how I use Airtable, it's not super important, but I could see a value in potentially some industries using this. But what's really cool is that, like, if you create a new one, it's going to go to 4. But then if you delete one, it's not going to go to. Let me just let's call this. Karen James. I'm just making shit up here. And then let's call this Johnny Rocket. All right, so see 4 and 5. So if you delete that, this is 5. So you know that there was a 4, but now there's not. So I guess doing this example is sort of the value of this is that you can see that there was a record 4 and now there's not, and you can't change this. I don't think you can. Yeah. So you can't change it. The only thing you can do is delete this and add a new thing. Let me see if it'll renumber. Yeah, so that's the only way you can actually correct it is if you delete this whole field and you re-add a new one. So there could be some potential, and you could hide this and no one would even know it's there. That way, that's sort of another way that you could kind of see are things getting deleted? Did something get deleted and then it was re-added again with different information? I don't know. That's a whole other thing I don't want to get into. And then button, I think, is really cool. It's a little bit more advanced, so I'm not going to get too far into it. But you can use a button to open a URL. Like, let's say you want to go to the website. Let's say you want to open, and you can create a formula here. So website. So it's going to say you can write the field name, the button. Let's say website here. The style. You can do a white background with all these different texts, or you can do a background color with text. I'm just going to leave it at the default for this. Create the field, and then it's going to have the website. So this one is lighter because there's no website in the actual field. It's blank. So if I go to this, I'm just going to click on that, and it's going to take me to Google. And not sure if you can see that on the video. Hopefully you can. But also within this button, you can also use it to open a page designer, which we'll go through later, which is what you can use to generate invoices based on the data that you have. You can run a script. You can preview a URL. You can send an email with an extension called SendGrid, which I don't use very much, but it seems very popular. You can create a document with FormStack. There's all these different things. Open a custom extension. There's a lot of ways that you can use this to, in a way, it's not really an automation, but it helps you to generate documents in a very quick way that is better than copying and pasting and definitely typing it. So I hope this was helpful, going through all the fields, what they're for. If you have any questions, please leave a comment and like and subscribe. And happy to chat with you more if you have some questions about Airtable fields. So until next time, have a good day.